In this video, we'll demonstrate how you can build a PhoneGap shell. The idea behind a PhoneGap shell is that when you're building a PhoneGap application, the process of building the application and then submitting the application to PhoneGap build and then installing the application onto your mobile device is tedious. And so during the development phase, you'd like to make it much easier to test changes to the component that you're building. So the PhoneGap shell allows you to build a component, install that on your device, and then dynamically load the component that you're actually developing into a panel in the shell so that you can go through a much more rapid design test process. So let's start out now and create a new PhoneGap shell. So we'll click on the Create New UX Component button, and from the list of templates here we'll choose the PhoneGap shell template. So the shell template opens up, and you can see that basically if we go to the controls, that essentially what's going on here is that we have two panel cards. We have a panel card that basically lets us specify what component we're testing, and then a second panel card that actually contains the UX component that we're actually testing. So let's go ahead now and save this component now. So we'll just call it say my shell 1, and first we'll just run it in working preview to get some idea of what's going to happen. So when we run the component here, we can see that what it does is lets us specify over here the name of a UX component that we'd like to test. So let's actually clear out the existing entry there. I'll just say edit and then clear out. So this is basically what it's going to look like when you run it for the first time. And you can see that in this project over here I've got another component called UX1, and let's assume that this is the component that I want to be testing on my phone, and I want to basically have a rapid design test cycle. So let's go back to our shell right now, and we'll add over here UX1. So now we've registered UX1 as one of the components that we'd like to test, and now when I click on this row in the list, you'll see that the component gets loaded dynamically, and here we are running that component UX1 in a panel in our shell. And if we want to go back and test a different component, we can go back here and add another UX component to this list, or go back here, and here we're running it. And now if we want to go and make a change to this component and then reload it, you can see I can just click the refresh button over there, and then the new component will load. So let's actually go back here to the UX. Let's go to this UX1 over here and add another button in, so you can see other, and we'll just go there and add in a button which we'll set to 100%, and we'll set this to login over there. So now we've made a change to UX1, and if we go back to our shell now and hit the refresh button, you can see now we basically added in this, we now see the login button. So even though I was just working in working preview over here, the same concept applies if this was actually running on a mobile device. When I click the refresh button, we'd be making a callback to the server and getting the updated version of the component, and we didn't have to go through the entire process of submitting it to PhoneGap build. So now that we've actually built our shell, so we've got our shell component over here, we can go ahead now and make this into a PhoneGap project. So we'll go to our control panel and click on PhoneGap. And so we'll need to specify the username and password of our PhoneGap account, and then of course we'll need to specify the name of the component. So the component is my shell, and you can see that a whole bunch of properties got filled in automatically, and they got filled in because we specified them as defaults in the shell. So there's our initial component. We can go here and change this to say alpha.shell1, and then change that to my shell1, and then we'll just go here and say alpha shell. So I'll pause now and pick this up in the next video. When you're building the shell, it's extremely important to get the Ajax, the URL for Ajax callbacks correct, because this is the URL that is called in order to dynamically load the component that you want to test. If you don't get this property correct, the shell's not going to work. So I'm going to go here and use, let's see, this is my correct value over there. So I've filled it in correctly for my machine, and obviously on your machine this is going to be totally different. But it's critically important that you get this property set correctly. And then the other thing that's really important is that you set the plugins that that you need correctly. So now obviously since you're going to be testing different components that you build in the future, you're not going to know for sure what plugins you need. So what we've done is we've chosen a lot of the common plugins, and those are now coded into the PhoneGap shell here. But let's say that in the future you were to design a new component, and in that component that you want to test, you want to use, say, the SQLite plugin. Well, since the shell wasn't built with SQLite, it's not going to work. So you're going to have to go back and rebuild the shell using the appropriate plugins. So now that I've basically got all this set up over here, I'm going to go ahead and submit this to PhoneGap shell. But before I do that, I have to fill in my username and password. So I'll pause now while I do that, and then I'll hit the save and upload button to upload this to PhoneGap build. Okay, so now you can see that we've submitted our project, MyShell1, to PhoneGap build, and the build has now completed. So I'm going to pause the video now and switch over to my iPhone, where I'm going to load this shell onto my iPhone. So here I go. I'm going to go now and scan my QR code, and then go ahead now and open this application on my phone. So let's go ahead now and see where it's installing it. Okay, so we have the app loaded over there, so we'll go ahead now and run the shell. And you can see now that at this point there's no applications registered. So I'm going to go ahead now and click the add button, and then type in, say, UX1, and then click the OK button. Now before I click this button to actually load the component into the shell, I have to make sure that UX1 has been published to my server. So I'm going to go back now to Alpha and go over to UX1 over here, and just go into live preview, which will publish that file to the server. So now it's been published to the server. So now I'm back on my phone here. I can click UX1, and you can see there we've basically gone back to the server to load UX1, and it's now running inside my PhoneGap shell. So let's go back now to UX1 and make a change. So I'm going to go here and add another button. So I'll just right click and say duplicate, and I'll call this button, say, log OUT. So there we've made our change. Save the component, go back to live preview, so we're publishing it to our to the live preview folder on the server. Go back to our component now and hit the refresh button, and you can see now that basically we have the refreshed component running in our shell. So we didn't have to go back to PhoneGap build to make any changes. We were able to dynamically load the component, and using this technique here we can dramatically shorten the development time for PhoneGap applications and take a lot of the pain of the PhoneGap build cycle out of the entire process. Thanks very much for watching.